to Unpacking Peanuts, the podcast where three cartoonists take an in-depth look at the greatest comic strip of all time, Peanuts by Charles M. Schulz.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. It's me, Jimmy Gownley, and this is Unpacking Peanuts. You might know me as being your host for this show, but also as the cartoonist behind Amelia Rules, The Dumbest Idea Ever, and 7 Good Reasons Not to Grow Up. Joining me, as always, are my pals, co-hosts, and fellow cartoonists. First, he's a playwright, a composer, both for the band Complicated People as well as for this very podcast. He co-created the first comic book price guide ever and was the original editor for Amelia Rules. He's also the cartoonist behind Strange Attractors, Tangled River, and A Gathering of Spells, Michael Cohen.
Hey there.
And he's the executive producer and writer for Mystery Science Theater 3000, a former vice president of Archie Comics, and the creator of the Instagram strip Sweetest Beasts, Harold Buchholz.
Hello.
Well, I'm very excited. It is a banner day here at Unpacking Peanuts. We have two very special guests. Will and Kevin Hines are comedians and hosts of the fabulous podcast, Screw It, We're Just Going to Talk About Comics, the only podcast in human history where two brothers discuss something they enjoy. The show has already run for several seasons and has included discussions about series as diverse as Sandman, Batman Year One, Justice League International, and the original Lee Ditko Spider-Man, and even all 101 issues of Stan Lee and Jack Kirby's Fantastic Four. The show drops every Wednesday, and just to gush a little bit here, I'd like to say I'm probably the first person to download and listen to each and every episode the second it comes out. So I am thrilled to welcome Kevin Hines and Will Hines. Guys, thanks for coming to the show.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.
Well, I am a huge fan of your podcast, going back to the very early days. And I think it has a really kind of sweet origin story, specifically about how you guys decided what comics you were going to be covering early on. Can you tell us about that?
Kevin, do you want to take that one?
We did the podcast, I think, partially because we live on different coasts and we weren't talking as much as we used to when Will lived in New York. So it was half an excuse just to talk to each other once a week, and half because we both really love the comic books we talk about. And when we started the podcast, it was just called Screw It, We're Just Going to Talk About Spider-Man, because he's our favorite character, our favorite superhero. And we had these pocket digests of the Stan Lee, Steve Ditko Spider-Man comics that Will had gotten from, I guess, a Walden Books somewhere. And we each had just read them 1,000 times over. We just read them over and over and over and over again and wore them out and talked about them and loved them even before we had read any like modern Spider-Man comics. So those ones obviously are important to Spider-Man because they're the first ones, but they're also our first ones, even though we were reading these in like the early 80s, and they just ended up meaning so much to us. Is that right, Will? Did I say that correctly?
You did that exactly right. Yeah. And even though after we finished Spider-Man, we were having such a good time, we changed the name to Screw It, We're Just Going to Talk About Comics instead of talk about Spider-Man, and to talk about whatever we wanted. And we do tend to skew to something we've both enjoyed, not necessarily as kids, sometimes as adults, although every now and then one of us will kind of bully the other one into covering something that they're not as into.
What one would that be? Is there anyone that you'd want to divulge that maybe one of you liked more than the other?
I think maybe Justice League Europe, Kevin, was a bit more you than me, although we both did read that and enjoy that. And then Sandman comics was a bit more me than you, although you did read Sandman and enjoy it.
And then there's things like Superior Spider-Man, which you had never read, but I had read and enjoyed. So
that's right. Yeah. I guess we've never actually had to bully each other, but sometimes one brother will take the lead in terms of picking. And we are reaching now. We maybe, now that I'm just saying that we haven't even said this to each other too much, but we maybe have used up the ones that we both read a lot, and are going to have to move into stuff where one of us is leading the other one a little bit, I think.
Yeah, at least the big tent poles that we read and loved are gone. There's a couple left, like Walt Simonson's Thor and John Byrne's FF.
Oh yeah, we have a lot. We could also do Power Pack. Oh, never mind. There's a lot. But, if we want to move out of the 1980s comics, we're going to have to be a bit more adventurous.
Yeah, that'll be impossible because we didn't live together after that. So like the stuff that we both read were the ones that like basically Will kept in his closet and I would go into and read. Once those were gone, once that part of our life was gone, like we were reading different stuff constantly.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say I have a very similar taste. I think Will and I are roughly the same age, almost probably exactly the same age.
83 years old.
Yes.
83 years old. Yeah,
exactly.
I didn't start reading comics till I was about 50. You really got into early 80s stuff.
That's
great.
That's the time, though. You're mid to early. That's when you want to get into comics. You know, it helps with your reading skills. It's great.
That's when Stan was aiming for. You know,
he wanted to write to his peers. You know.
Yep.
So here's my question: because first I found out about you guys. First off, I'm a huge Beatles fan, and you would think, listeners, that it is very easy to find a great Beatles podcast that you can listen to. It is not. 99% of them are kind of insufferable. But I found, screw it, we're just going to talk about the Beatles. Recommended it to Michael. We became big fans. And then it was recommended to me, screw it, we're just going to talk about Spider-Man. And first I was like, oh, someone stole his branding. That really sucks. and then I thought, oh, it's the same guy. Well, maybe the only possible way I would listen to this is if by some miracle they were talking about the Steve Ditko issues. And when those guys, I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And I found I was the same way. I was reading comics in the 70s and 80s, and I always felt that the current Spider-Man at the time looked like the stuff that was on the lunch boxes. And the Ditko stuff, which was Marvel Tales at the time, I didn't even realize it was old. I just, that looked like Spider-Man to me. Can you guys talk about what it was with you that made those particular issues just call out to you?
Well, like Kevin said, those are the ones we just sort of happened to have, right? In the late 70s, Marvel released these little paperback pocket digests of the first 20 issues of Spider-Man. We got them just because they were in the bookstore, and we were just the kind of kids who would float to the book section and, you know, poke around the humor books and the comic book stuff. You know, we'd buy that, and, you know, collections of Peanuts books, which we'll talk about. And you know, I mean, I think we would buy anything. We would buy like Broomhilda collections. Like, it wasn't even just whatever was there in cartoon form we were interested in.
I've weirdly
one
thought
way or
about
the other.
Broomhilda a lot lately. I don't know why that is, but we definitely had collections of Broomhilda.
But it's really gratifying to hear that you like these podcasts, by the way, because, I mean, as Kevin said, we did it primarily to talk to each other, but you do sort of hope that they're entertaining. And both with comic books and even more so with the Beatles, there are a ton of podcasts. And I've listened to a handful of other podcasts on those subjects. And I always get an inferiority complex when I hear something else. I'm like, oh, gosh, they're so well researched, or like, you know, they're so this or that or whatever. But you have to just kind of hope that you're bringing some kind of vibe when you do something. I'm sure you guys feel that way about this podcast too.
Right.
Yeah, but well researched doesn't always make it. It could be like the Green Llama first appeared in the issue.
It is a balance though. Like when we first started our Beatles podcast, which I just did, you know, very impulsively. I was like, honestly, what happened was Donald Trump got elected. I personally did not agree with Donald Trump, and I was dismayed.
Big Stan.
So, you're a big fan. Kevin's a big fan, but build a wall. Kevin always said when he was like 10 years old.
I'm just a big fan of walls. I mean,
yeah, it's not even immigration. You just like the structure.
A wall, any place, anytime.
Yeah, man, more walls.
That built out of Lincoln logs, preferably.
Yeah. Knock them down, build them up again. That's the fun part.
But my friends were so angry and talking about politics so much, which is totally their right. I was like, I wanted a place to not talk about politics. Not that I think it's always wrong to do so, but I was like, okay, screw it. We're just going to talk about the Beatles. Like, you know what? We come on here and just talk about something that I love and it's joyful. But I was like, I know the Beatles.
Right.
I've listened to those albums a million times, and I had no research ready. Luckily, I brought on some guests who, over the course of the first 10 episodes, brought up my education a lot. At this point, we've done 75 or 80 episodes. And my education is now much more seasoned. And I think it isn't a good, we do try to avoid having it just be a trivia contest of facts and stuff. But you want to know some basic stuff so the listener isn't just screaming at their headphones that you're missing some quite obvious facts. A balance is necessary.
There's knowing stuff, and then there's just being wronged a lot. Exactly. Sometimes we go too far on that side, I think, where we just say things and then 3 episodes later we're like, so we've gotten a bunch of emails. Apparently
for some reason
I did, and Stan Lee was the writer. We got that backwards.
we didn't know that.
Well, one of my first forays onto the internet, way back when, I was like a Beatles message board. And they were talking about she said, and I said, and I put something they said something about George playing bass. And I very innocently wrote, I think Paul played bass on that. That is incorrect.
Right.
I got alerts for that for 11 years.
Oh, yeah.
Like not often, every couple months, but like finally they shut the board down. I was like, thank God.
I know that Kevin and I are a comic book podcast. This is a Peanuts podcast, but one thing about the Beatles that it's so obvious, but it's maybe not talked about directly, is how insanely well documented this band is.
Yeah.
I was talking with the other guys on the Beatles podcast. We're like, what other band do we know the names of each spouse of each member? Like, I love the Kinks. I have no idea who they're married to.
Right, and have intense personal thoughts about it.
Yeah.
Right.
And what they had for lunch, like on June.
Yeah, exactly.
3rd,
Or when they met
1964.
and like what songs they auditioned to get into each other's band. But not only do I know that, like, that's fairly common knowledge.
Yeah.
I mean, plenty of people don't know that stuff, but you don't have to go through too many Beatles fans before you can find out, like, name all the Beatles' wives. Like,
Right.
the fair number of people can do that. That's like, what's going on?
Right.
What's wrong with me and everybody?
Well, we end up talking about the Beatles a fair amount because Peanuts, in a lot of ways, is the only thing we could think of that kind of, at least in our realm of interest, that compares to it. It's just this artistic achievement that's ubiquitous. Yeah.
Commercially successful.
Well, the reason I connect the two is how often is the absolute best thing in the field also the most popular thing in the field?
Exactly. It's rare. I think the allmusic.com summary of the Beatles biography is something like, says exactly that. Like, they were both commercially at the top of their field and critically acclaimed at the same time. It almost never happens. Maybe, I don't know, maybe in movies sometimes, like Steven Spielberg, but
Right.
I don't know. It's never quite the same.
Well, there's Broomhilda.
And Broomhilda, the other one, yeah.
Top of the charts and critics' darling, Broomhilda. Sad Sack Comics, that's a number 2.
Right.
Peanuts is beloved and great and popular. But the one thing Peanuts has on everything else is its longevity. Like,
It's crazy.
I bought the Fantagraphics complete Peanuts set just to stare at it and marvel at a beautiful life's work. I mean, it's endearing to me just that such pure love went into the product. Like, I
whenever I look at that shelf of those Fantagraphic books that I have, I think that's the guy's life, like right there on my shelf. You could
and a good one,
Yeah.
like a really like good-hearted one that took risks and was brave and was great a vast majority of the time. But even the shortcomings and the failures just kind of add to my love for it.
Yeah.
Failures is a bit too harsh to word, but even when he was sort of like, maybe not quite as focused or not as inspired or something, it's subjective. And I don't think there's huge periods of that, but that just adds to it. That's just like, that makes it real.
Yes, that's 100% how I feel. Like when his
And
hand
I'm
is
so grateful to Fantagraphics for doing the complete collection. Like, don't skip the clunkers. I want to read those too.
Oh, absolutely. And we are finding out as we go through the early episode or early years that tons of those were not reprinted. So it's amazing to be able to go back and look at those things and see like, oh, there's 40% of these early years that no one had seen until Fantagraphics put them out. So you're reading these. Well, tell me about Peanuts. Did you read it in the newspaper when you were a kid, or was it just in those books?
Yeah. This is another thing that my brother Kevin helped him with. So we read them in the comic strips. We read all the comic strips, from good ones to also ones that we probably didn't understand.
Yeah, our newspaper had like a single page of comics. Some papers had lots. We had just like single page, but I would read them all, even the bad ones, because it was like only a couple that I didn't like. So I was like, I might as well just read every one on this page. But it was also like a heyday, right? Because we had there's Bloom County and Calvin and Hobbes and Farside were all chucking along by the time I was really reading comic strips. So
you could quote all whole swaths of Mary Worth. And
I don't know if we had Mary Worth, to be honest. I now read Mary Worth because of blogs that make fun of it. And it's delightfully fun.
Hey, is Mary Worth, I think, is being drawn by June Brigman.
That's right, June Brigman of Power Pack.
Which is a classic comic.
I mean, I'm amazed at these strips that just went on for decades, and they had their fans. There was a following.
Yeah, how did Apartment 3G get such a foothold in newspapers?
I think there were a lot of people who lived in an Apartment 3G, and they felt a connection.
That was it.
Just one person in every apartment complex.
I did live in an apartment 3F for a little while, so maybe that was my problem. It just felt too far-fetched.
Right, too much.
Yeah, I was like, G?
They're pushing it to
No way.
3G. Give me a break. Nobody goes into G. Remember, Kevin? Do you remember Gilthorpe?
Oh, sure.
But that was in Milford, Connecticut. Like Kevin and I grew up in Danbury, Connecticut, and Gilthorpe was a sort of a merry world, like a soap opera style one about a sports coach.
Yeah.
But it was like, drama. It was like the drama of the kids and stuff going on. But it was in Milford, Connecticut. It took place a couple towns over.
Here's a crazy thing. Broomhilda wasn't in our comic strip page.
Yeah, why'd we buy those books?
I don't know why we had those books.
It was exotic, right?
Yeah, I guess so. We're like the dark arts.
I think they were just collected. I mean, I think we would just buy them. I think we only had a couple of volumes, but I actually remember enjoying them. They're talking about it.
They're well drawn, and
yeah.
Well, and it was just hard to get any kind of comic stuff. Like you go into Walden Books and whatever they had, that was like the canon of comics. You just
right. And we did buy the Peanuts collections, and so
those little paperback ones,
yeah,
the little paperback ones, and we bought a lot of those. Like when Fantagraphics released their complete collection, whenever that happened in the 2000s, I was surprised how many I remembered. Yes, there also were a bunch that hadn't been reprinted, but I was like, man, Kevin and I did a pretty good job of getting a lot of those paperbacks and reading a lot of the ones up through 1978. But we bought those and we read those a ton. But then when I got older, Peanuts was lame, like to me. Like when I got to be a teenager, I was like, no, man, Far Side is it. Bloom County is it. Peanuts is square. Like truly, I did have.
It was Will's beatnik phase.
That's square, man. Far Side is with it.
That's not hep, I said. I mean, I wasn't passionately anti-Peanuts, but I was like, that's for kids.
Yeah.
I'm cool. I get Doonesbury or whatever. But then I think it was Kevin when I was in my 20s was like, we were just talking comics and Kevin was like, those Peanuts stuff is really funny. Like, it's really good. And I was like, what? It can't be. And then I reread.
I think we went together to a Barnes and Noble. And like,
okay, yes.
And I think we went there because I wanted to prove to you Peanuts was good.
Oh, I love that.
We were pulling out volumes and flipping through it, and you were like, "Oh man, these are great."
Yeah, and then at the same time, the Comics Journal, which is sort of like news and criticism from Fantagraphics, did their 100 greatest comics of all time. This was like in the late 90s or something, and it was Fantagraphics always wants to prove it has a wide taste, so that would be anything from like Spider-Man to like some French indie comic that had only been printed in the pages of Raw magazine or something. But number one was Peanuts. And it was like number one with a bullet. Like they raved about it. And I was like, number one from the snobbiest comic book magazine possible. Like from the, from the truly like clove cigarette smoking, turtleneck wearing snobs were like, number one is Peanuts.
It was number 2.
Is it number 2? Oh, one was Crazy Cat.
Facts.
I am furious.
Jimmy and I are still angry
Crazy
about
Cat.
that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The only reason I know that is, like Michael
read.
said, we have been furious about it for 25 years.
As I said it. See, this is what I get wrong in my Beatles podcast. So number 1 was Crazy Cat.
You guys can't let facts stop you from making points. Oh my goodness. Oh no.
But
and that closed cigarette thing, that's going to be checked. I know.
Okay, but it was high enough that it made me like, whoa, like. And then another friend of mine who John Reynolds, Kevin, a comedian friend of ours in New York, was also like, and Peanuts was still happening. This is the late 90s. It stopped in 2000. And John was like, Schulz has been turning it on lately. Like he kind of got a little tired of the mid 90s, and lately it's been great. I was like, really? And then I was like, people are keeping track of like Peanuts. And it really made me have new appreciation. And then when the Fantagraphics books came out, I just got them all, and it kind of reignited my childhood love of them.
Will's range from like as a kid buying them to not liking them to getting all of them is very funny to me.
Yeah.
So it's a real roller coaster of emotions.
But I'm glad I got into Peanuts. Here's a really dumb side note. We've already had a million. But Kevin and anybody, do you remember on those little paperbacks we got in the 70s, the original things we bought? It would be like, you're a good egg, Charlie Brown, or something like that. Yeah. And Snoopy would be lying on an Easter egg or something. But then like there'd be little fine print on the cover. It would say part 2 of Stop Hitting Me in the Face, Charlie Brown, or whatever. Right. And so like these little paperbacks were themselves reissues of some larger collection, which I never saw.
Harold,
like
this,
I only
right?
had these little paperbacks that were like referring to like, oh, this is actually a reissue of some earlier one, but I never saw
that was always
earlier.
a mystery to me. It just
Also,
like because you never saw those originals. No one ever saw.
Yeah,
them.
but and also, why did they care? Do they think some 8-year-old kid is going to be buying it? It's like, wait a minute, I already got, Too Many Shoes, Charlie Brown, and what is this? These are
worst book titles in the world, by the way.
That's exactly, I think, what's happened. I think it was Holt, Reinhardt, and Winston, or Henry Holt. I don't know what they were at the time. They were publishing these ones for the general market trade, and then Fawcett got the rights to do the mass markets, and so vastly more people read those Fawcett Crest books. And so, I think they were obligated. I don't know if Holt required them to do it, or they just got some complaints, and so they said, "Okay, we got them from this book that's already been out for a year."
It's also interesting to me that like those paperbacks are just not formatted. The size of a paperback is terrible for comic strips.
Yeah.
This is like before you had a lot of these like wide books. Like I guess Garfield maybe did a ton of those. Maybe that's when it became super. Everything had those.
Yeah, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But like Peanuts books are like, like you have to like, where do you put the panels on the page? But like that's how I read so many of those old Peanut strips that I still picture those as like the perfect Peanuts books, even though they are like the worst way maybe
right
to deliver them.
Yeah, we were talking about that, how it was amazing that Schulz did not. I mean, what can you do? That's the format that's selling all of the copies. But he must have cringed when he looked at those books. He saw his works being overlapped with panels, and the Sundays are being spread out, and they're adding these weird zipatone things on the pages to kind of balance them out a little bit. But knowing that Schulz did everything himself, and then someone's coming along and just kind of cutting and pasting, you could just see someone with that waxing machine, running the proofs through, and it's like, oh, well, let's see what we'll do with this one. And, it's amazing what Schulz put up with, given he just had such pride in his work.
They still worked, right? Like I loved those paperback books, and it was still his panels. They didn't mess within the panel borders, and they're hilarious.
And they reached a huge audience. I mean,
huge.
So maybe Schulz just had an instinct for like, well, there's more good than bad going on here, or maybe he just didn't. He also seemed to be a bit of a company man. Like he was a bit of like, I go to work and do my job, and I don't complain. Like if you're going to shrink me to 3 panels, I'll do 3 panels. Like I'll make it work.
I think it was a faithfulness to the syndicate. That they gave him his deal in 1950. He was the kind of guy that never forgot that and said, "Yeah, this is commercial art."
He thanks the editors in his very last strip, which is crazy. And the editor should have been thanking him at that point.
You gotta love him for that. Yeah.
That's part of what's endearing about it. So that's how we got into it. So we got into it as kids, but then I lost my way, and Kevin dragged me back to the true path. Kevin and Fantagraphics.
The hardest part for me was getting Fantagraphics to start doing those reprints to get Will back on. But
I appreciate it.
Yeah, you don't get enough credit for that.
Yeah, well, that's fine.
By the way, I love your dedication that you're going to drag him to a Barnes and Noble to prove your point. That sounds like an insane thing I would do, and I just hats off.
We were like, I was in my 30s and Kevin was in his 20s. Like, how weird were we? Or maybe I was like 29, but it was like, you've got to come right now to see Peanuts. And I was like, you are correct. This is like in New York, right?
I think
like,
so. I think
we could have gone to see the opera at Met. You know what I mean? Or a baseball game in Yankee Stadium. We're like, we're going to Barnes and Noble.
I remember it as the Barnes and Noble that used to be part of Madison Square Garden.
Oh
right there.
Okay,
that's how I remembered. I'm not 100% sure because I remember they had like the comic shelves where they were in that store. They were like around the corner towards the back exit, and we were like between two of those shelves and just like, which ones do they have? Because my other worry was we were going to go and they would only have like a couple editions, and then maybe what if they're not the best ones?
92 or
but
something.
But then there was enough of them, and they were all great. And I was like, I guess I started panicking that like if Will doesn't like these, I lose. I don't know.
Well, you just never speak again. That'd be the end of it. But Thanksgiving's would be super.
That was an option, yeah.
I just saw the sketch you did, the Garfooled sketch that you did back in 2013.
I can't believe you found that.
It did air on Saturday Night Live 4 or 5 times.
But in truth, it's on my Vimeo channel.
That's how I saw it. Yeah. And I was just
20 views.
Just watching you go through all of these strips from memory and how random, like you were just jumping from like group to group. And basically the premise is that someone's being fired because they're doing Garfooled and it's like a knockoff of Garfield. And it's like he's changing only minor details, and yet he feels it's, you know, an important strip. And the artist is basically saying that every strip he can think of, that his strip is better than.
Yeah. So we listed just every comic strip we could think of. So what you're referring to, Kevin and I did improv comedy at the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater in addition to being brothers. And when I
two achievements.
But that particular show, so we used to do an improv show every week for an hour, and then I was moving to Los Angeles, and so we wrote a sketch show of our favorite scenes that we had improvised. Like, we just from memory, we're like, oh yeah, that was a good one, and so we kind of like revised from memory these improv scenes. You know, we tried to improve them or whatever.
And they weren't taped, so like we probably forgot some of the funny stuff and added in new funny stuff or whatever.
Well, I'm sure that you didn't memorize that script of exactly the 100 strips that you.
Yeah, Garfooled was definitely one that we improvised, where Kevin was a guy. In the original improv scene, Kevin, maybe you were the guy who was doing the comic or whatever.
Yeah,
I remember you came up with Garfooled. And I remember in the improv scene, like, it totally broke me on stage. It was we had improvised that somebody was being indignant about their comic strip, and I was like, oh, I wonder if he's going to pick a real one. He goes, Garfooled, and I was like, ooh.
I just remember name one, like, it was just the fun. The heart of that strip is name something better, or what? Right? Wasn't that it?
Yeah.
And then you list every strip or whatever I listed.
That's right. Name something better than Garfooled, and I was like, better than Garfooled, and named everyone. That's right.
Yeah, and the version I saw, I think it was the artist saying everything that his strip was better than, as I recall. And then what the capper was that that the one guy who's the assistant in the room who's never said anything until the end offers Blondie, and then both of you guys just turn on him.
Yeah, we just dump on Blondie.
How dare you, sir?
Yeah, the hook of our sketch show was that we would have people from the audience join us, and so that third person was from the audience and
holding a script they'd never seen
holding a
before.
script, and like we would there was sort of like a hidden game of like they would either have no lines or we would be mean to them, and then our director would come on and be like, why are you having them join your sketches if you're just going to yell at them one time?
I mean, this is truly insane that you've watched this. Like, we did it one night. We taped it just for ourselves.
We bullied the theater into letting us have a slot because we're like, we don't even want to run. We just want to do it once.
We want to do it once and tape it. The audience was half full. It went over all right.
I think it went over pretty well. It was all friends. I mean, it was the friendliest audience we could have.
Yeah.
Then the only better audience would be like all our aunts.
The audience was totally with you. It was great.
Oh,
and
really nice.
Some of them were on stage with us.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I want to ask you while we're on these strange Google searches, Will, on your IMDb, there is a 3-minute short, I think, that's called The Snoopy Lamp. Is that right?
Yeah, right. Snoopy Lamp.
What was that?
So I directed it. It's a friend of mine named Sean Clements, who's a pretty big TV writer. Like, he's written for a ton of TV shows now, but at this time he was just an improv guy at the UCB Theater in New York. He wrote this sketch called Snoopy Lamp, which is about a film noir style hard-boiled detective who's like looking around the room and trying to figure out a mystery. And the mystery is obvious. There's like a dead body, a knife in the back, a letter from a spurned lover. And he's like, I don't know. I think this Snoopy lamp is the key to the mystery. And everyone's like, no, it's not. It's not that. He's like, there's something about this lamp. And he was like, won't stop talking about the Snoopy lamp. And I loved it. It really made me laugh. And so we just filmed a version of it. Had to find a Snoopy lamp, and then, set directed a room and did it in black and white, light through the shutters and stuff like that. And I think, once again, you guys are one of the few people to have seen that. That was not or maybe you didn't. Sounds like you didn't see it.
No, it was a total mystery.
Is there any way people could see it?
No, because it was the UCB used to have a video server. Like, they kind of created their own YouTube service, but it like crashed at some point, so it's gone. I have a director's reel on my Vimeo, and there's a snippet from it in that. Okay. That's it. I have 3-second snippet of a guy going Snoopy Lamp. Like, that's it. That's in the reel. I adored that sketch, and we filmed it, and me and Sean could not stop giggling, as I recall. But the artistic director of the ECB Theater, this guy named Anthony King, really smart and nice guy, looked at it, he goes, "You just say Snoopy Lamp too many times." We're like, well, not enough for me. I loved it.
Would you mind if we ran some of the video or some of the audio of that the Garfooled sketch, just so people can kind of get a sense of what we're talking
Please
about?
run the whole show. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, we'd love to.
So, hey, how about we take a break right now, and then we come back and we'll go through some of the picks you have for your favorite peanut strips.
Love it.
All right. That's what we're going to do now. All right. We'll see you on the other side.
Name one strip that Garfooled is better than.
Garfield.
I don't agree with that.
It's also better than The Far Side, Balloon County, Dilbert, Peanuts, Calvin and Hobbes.
Those are some of the best comic strips that have ever been.
Wrong! Garfooled is also better than Beetle Bailey, Hagar the Horrible, Rose is Rose, BC, The Wizard of Id, High and Lois, Andy Cat, Marmaduke, Heathcliff, Dennis the Menace, Family Circus, Ziggy, Mother Goose and Grimm, Mama, Herman, Shoe, Hazel, Fred Bassett, Doonesbury, Tank McNamara, Funky Winkerbean, Mallard Fillmore, They'll Do It Every Time, The Lockhorns, Small Society, Love Is, Ripley's Believe It or Not, Curtis.
All right. And we're back. So how about we just get right to it and start looking at these comic strips?
Do it.
February 19th, 1952. Charlie Brown is drawing on a little chalkboard for Schroeder. He says, "See, Schroeder, there's a cat." Now in panel 2, we see Charlie Brown wiping it out, and he says, "Now I'll draw a dog." Snoopy comes up behind Schroeder, intent on seeing what's going on. Charlie Brown then reveals his chalkboard drawing of a dog, which makes Snoopy burst out laughing. In the last panel, Charlie Brown walks away, embarrassed and chagrined. You get a lot of chagrin in Peanuts comics. Now, who picked this one?
This was one of the ones I picked.
Nice. Okay, so tell us about this. What was this for you?
Well, I wanted to pick one of these almost like proto Peanuts, even though I guess it was actually Peanuts, like from the it just looks a little different.
Yeah.
They're so charming. And as you guys alluded to earlier, like these are like the batch that I didn't read until the Fantagraphics collections came out.
Right.
And there's something about like dog Snoopy versus like, every person Snoopy that he becomes later on that I find so charming, and like this kind of even rounder, gianter head Charlie Brown. So I just love the look of it. So I was going through a lot of those old ones to pick one. And I don't know, the idea of a dog, like Snoopy laughing, isn't that weird? But a real dog laughing at you is so funny to me. And it really comes across in this strip. It's both such a great visual gag, this little image of Snoopy laughing. There's no sound, like they don't write the words ha ha ha, so you just see Snoopy laughing, but it's crystal clear what is happening. Charlie Brown is surprised by it. Schroeder seems like, what's going on here? But instead of like, my dog just laughed at me, it's just like, yeah, I did a bad job on that drawing. It's sort of the reaction. It is so true to the spirit of the strip, but it is so bizarre. I'm sort of a little bit drawn to the absurdity of Peanuts that I forget is in there, because you get all this almost philosophical statements sometimes, but like it gets so absurd. And this is just tip of the iceberg absurdity.
It's amazing how we get pulled into the absurdity, and it just becomes, we just accept it.
Yeah, you don't think about it even. We were doing a strip in a couple episodes where it was about Charlie Brown has Snoopy sleeping inside, and Snoopy starts snoring, and he has to send him out in the doghouse or whatever. And then Charlie Brown feels bad, brings him back in. Then Charlie Brown starts snoring, and then he goes out and sleeps on the doghouse. And like the premise of the joke that Charlie Brown snoring, then the dog snoring, and one of them is one thing. But then there's this whole other level of, it's funnier because now they're both sleeping on top of the doghouse, which is weird in and of itself. And you never even think about it, because of course that's what you would do in Peanuts. You would never, but it's a truly surreal image when you actually stop and think about it.
Yeah. And isn't that a gorgeous drawing of Schroeder in that first panel? That's kind of this, but it's a little bit behind the head. And we had a theory that maybe Schulz was inspired by Gerald McBoing when he created Schroeder. Because it's kind of got that, he has that kind of early almost UPA look to some of
I
his
don't think I
art.
know what Gerald McBoing Boing is. What is that?
It was a UPA cartoon about a little boy who did not speak. He instead, everything was sound effects that came out of him, and so he's at first made fun of, and then people start to accept him for who he is and love him for who he is. It was like Mr. Magoo. There was a Gerald McBoing going Mr. Magoo TV show. It was one of the first animated TV shows out there, but it was for its time, I guess it was probably the second most popular thing that came out of UPA, which was the response to the Disney kind of realism in animation. They were going for much more stylized work. And it's interesting to see Schulz in that world of, stylized art at this really early era where the look is way different from what he really just makes his own in later years. But it's hard it was because of Peanuts being Peanuts. It's like saying, you talk about the influences of the Beatles, you can find them, but it's just, you just take the Beatles at face value. And I think Peanuts is similar. It's really hard to kind of say, what inspired Schulz,
right. One thing that's weird and sort of interesting in this strip is, especially if you look at the third panel, Schulz went out of his way in later years to say Charlie Brown's not meant to be bald. He just has a really tight crew cut that you can, and his hair so blonde you can almost see through it. He described it. You can see that he's trying to do that with Charlie Brown and Schroeder. They're both supposed to have the same haircut, but it's I think the roundness of Charlie Brown's head that just made it impossible to see that as hair, right? I mean, there's just
I definitely picture him as a bald 5-year-old, but
everybody in the world doesn't, and Schulz never even colored it that way, so I don't know what he was on about. But
yeah, I mean, I could definitely picture like in old movies, like the kid with the crew cut and the slingshot in his pocket, like the super tight buzz cut. So I know what he's going for, but I don't know. It's just funnier if Charlie Brown is a middle-aged personality at 5.
Much funnier.
This strip, I love how slapstick it is. Like like a lot of Peanut strips, the punchline is sort of the third panel, like the dog laughing, and then there's a fourth panel of sort of aftermath. So it's like slapsticky. Dog laughs. There's this exclamation point over Charlie Brown that really just makes me laugh. That just makes me smile. There's like dink, just like my dog is laughing at me. But then the blushing and walking away, the humiliation in the fourth panel. What a subtle, confident sort of like, this is a good way to end the strip. Yeah. My protagonist is blushing. That's my capper. But it works, right? Like, I don't know how he had the confidence to know that was funny, but it is.
And, compared to the other stuff that was going on at the time, things like Little Abner or Dick Tracy or whatever, I mean, this is as minimal as you can get. But confidence is a huge part of it for sure.
And the other thing I was struck by when Kevin dragged me to the Barnes & Noble and made me re-look at Peanuts is how just how visual it is. Like, for some reason, I remember the words a lot more of comic strips, but Schulz is definitely visual first. Like, the gag has to be shown. Like, it's got to be like 60% of Peanut strips are visual gags, if not more.
Yeah.
And it's minimal and sparse and calm, and the drawing is so certain and direct. He's good, Charles Schulz.
My friend Anne is a huge Peanuts fan, grew up a huge Peanuts fan, but her father is blind, and she used to read the strips to him, and she could never get him to understand why on earth this was funny. He's like, this is the most depressing thing I've ever heard. It's like, well, because you can't see how cute the round-headed kid is. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a gestalt for sure.
It's also Schroeder used to be Charlie Brown's like best friend. I think that's interesting too.
He was the first new character introduced, right? After the original 4.
Yeah, he was baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what's a little jarring looking at this thing, because we've evolved. We're up to 1964, but we started with the first year, and we were keeping an eye on things like, when did Snoopy sort of transcend being a puppy?
Right.
And a little thing like the fact that he can look at a drawing, or that little question mark above his head. He really was a dog. And then just this very, very slow transformation into what, the Snoopy we all know and love.
The evolution of Peanuts is fascinating, and that's what the Fantagraphics series is so great about. But like that Schroeder sort of filled the Linus role for a while, because even when Linus showed up, he was a baby for so long, and Lucy couldn't fill that role. So it was just Schroeder and Shermie to a lesser extent. Kind of were often just the one sitting and hanging out with Charlie Brown for them to talk to each other. And then Schroeder just sort of moved over to the side to play piano and let Linus take that spot.
Yeah.
One of the things that really struck us, I think in 1964, Michael's been tracking the characters, and one of the things that came out of that is we're 14 years into the strip, and there's only one character in any strip he's ever introduced that is no longer in the strip. One. I mean, that's amazing that he was so loyal to his little cast, and he didn't just randomly throw characters in and into
which
the
he
strip.
will soon be doing left and right. Poor Shermie.
Jeremy gets the boot.
Yeah, wither Shermie. But I love the strip, and I like that we have a representation from the Proto Peanuts original style. Looks great. Also, he does camera angles here, like that sort of stops, right? Like everything's kind of a straight shot, so that it's more deadpan.
The camera kind of pans in that strip.
Yeah. Yeah, he experimented a lot with that stuff at the beginning, and then just slowly moved into this really spare iconographic, I guess you'd say, style that everyone knows as Peanuts. But it is, like you say, in those Fantagraphics books, it's fantastic to watch that happen. September 5th, 1959. We have 3 silent panels. In the first one, Charlie Brown is standing right beside home plate, holding his baseball bat, wearing his hat, and just staring blankly. In the second panel, it is the exact same pose, no words, only this time he has dropped his bat and closed his eyes. In the third panel, it is exactly the same, except now he has those famous 2 parentheses on either side of his eyes, indicating that he is upset. And then in the fourth panel, Charlie Brown says, "I think I'm going to cry." All right, whose was that?
This is another one of mine. I'm part of picking a favorite strips of stuff is because I'm drawn to like the long storylines where it's like, oh, I love this like 10 strip storyline. It's like, which one strip signifies that? And sometimes they're great, and sometimes they don't really pull out as well. Like they're great in context of the whole story. This was like just him, like whatever, striking out and losing the game. Like he was put in as a pinch hitter, which is crazy for a little league game. And he strikes out and they lose the game. And so this is just the aftermath. But I weirdly think it works even without knowing that. Like, that he's done something bad, and it is so perfectly Charlie Brown. I don't know. When I was flipping through and picking one, I was like, oh, why do I keep going back to this strip?
It's kind of like Garfield without Garfield, when you have the context.
It's also so ballsy that this was like on a comics page, just this alone with no context. It is insane.
There is no joke at all.
Yeah.
I mean,
and yet it is funny.
It is funny, yeah.
Well, I guess it's like an anti-joke. It's like we're on the
joke.
comics page and but also he's visual, right? Like there's 4 different expressions of Charlie Brown here, just done with almost emojis. Like there's 2 pupils in the first panel, then there are dashes in the next panel, then there are pupils with like the parentheses around them that make them look kind of like wide-eyed, and then the same thing with bigger pupils in the last one.
The most minimal conceivable changes to a drawing, and you completely follow the journey of this kid's emotion across 4 panels.
I mean, there's not a punchline, but there's character humor there because it's Charlie Brown, of course.
Yes.
But also just that he's standing there alone, wallowing in this. I mean,
he's at home plate with a bat by his feet. I mean, wouldn't somebody come up to him and be like, the next batter has to come up. You got to get out of here.
The game's over. But it is just weird that he would just be alone there. I mean, it becomes such a thing for Charlie Brown to be like left outside sobbing or whatever after losing a baseball game. But it's still funny, the idea that he just, I mean, they go back to this idea that he'll stay out all night on the pitcher's mound. But like, this is like the first glimpse of that, or an early glimpse of that. Just this kid going, oh man, I hate how bad I was at this.
There's at least one other time where he strikes out and it haunts him for like weeks, or days. Like there'll be a couple of days later, he wakes up in the middle of the night, goes, "Oh, strike 3."
Yeah, we covered that one in a recent or an upcoming episode, I guess. So funny, and I do, again, just the absolute confidence that people know who Charlie Brown is, so you don't have to give them any context for this. The world knows who Charlie Brown is. Here, just 4 panels.
I just keep picturing this like on a page below High and Lois or whatever, but above Hagar the Horrible, and just being like, this strip would stand out so interestingly to anyone.
I think it makes it feel like all those other strips are trying so hard.
Yeah.
And this one is effortless, you know?
Yeah, I don't think Schulz ever did a final, like a fourth panel when someone tells a joke and then you just see the feet of the person up in the air, flip backward.
Now I kind of wish he did.
Wouldn't it be great? That was the final peanut strip. It was.
Yeah.
I'm allergic to peanuts. Oh! What happened?
I mean, that's been one of the big questions that I've been asking as we've gone through these, just year by year, is what is it about, what is Schulz doing that makes us connect so deeply to characters when, like you say, all around him are other strips where we don't feel that way toward the characters? What is it that he's doing that makes us so deeply connect to each of these individual characters?
I think some of it is just the medium, like just words and pictures, a minimal abstract drawing. We project onto it. Because I think even the terrible comic strips, I don't want to give an example, but even like a lame comic strip, the ones, when Kevin and I were kids, we'd read them all. I enjoyed somewhat all of them. And I think that's just it's like if you go to a piano and hit 3 chords that are in the same key, a listener projects a song onto it. So some of it is the medium is getting him partway there, and then he's just the best at it.
Do you think it's the subtlety? I mean, the fact that this strip is such a perfect example that it kind of pulls us in, or
you get it, the reader, you get it, even though he's giving you so little, is satisfying.
Mm-hmm. And he gets the character probably. And I don't know if that's necessarily true of all characters, but I think like a lot of characters in strips are just sort of like symbolic of something, and that's not necessarily true of always. Like I'm gonna use Beetle Bailey as an example, and I can't say I've never read the original strips, right? But like at some point it just becomes, Beetle Bailey represents this, right. Where I think Charles Schulz was like, no, I know Charlie Brown, I know exactly what Charlie Brown would do here. It's the same thing from like a good sitcom to a bad sitcom, right?
Yeah,
they're both like set up joke, but when you watch a good episode of Cheers, even though like the characters could just be tropes of like barfly, bartender, a dumb guy, those could be their tropes, but the actors and the writers understand like Woody and Sam and Norm in a way that transcends those tropes. Those tropes are just the entryway, and I think that's what's happening with Charles Schulz. Like, Charlie Brown is a loser, but he's way more than that.
He feels it deeply, and somehow he's able to express that back to us, and we feel it along with him. That is not easy to do. I mean, it's a remarkable what he's doing here.
And you would just drag readers one by one down to Barnes and Noble, say, look, I'm great at this. Well, let me tell you, as someone who struck out 27 times in a row in Little League, I relate to that strip in a big way.
You remember that number?
Oh, I'll never forget that number ever. When I got a job at ABC 27, the first thing I thought was, that was... It's like 20 years after Little League.
The number haunts you.
Yes, it does. 27. No.
Portent.
March 2nd, 1956. Snoopy is crawling down on his stomach with a strange, wild look on his face. Charlie Brown is kneeling in front of him saying, Snoopy, pretending that you're an alligator doesn't make you one, Snoopy continues crawling past Charlie Brown, who's now standing up and saying, why can't you be satisfied with just being a dog? Now it's just Charlie Brown who's calling out after Snoopy, who has left him behind. Be happy with the things you have. Be happy with what you are. You dumb dog.
This is mine, and I love it. Just Charlie Brown getting angrier and angrier that Snoopy's not settling, I guess.
Right.
Like he's trying to be reasonable, then he's trying to be logical, then he's just screaming, and then he's just so frustrated. You dumb dog. Like, I don't know why it tickles me so much. It's verbal, but it also is like the physicality of how Schulz draws the letters, communicate a lot of emotion. Charlie Brown getting angrier and angrier. And at this point, Charlie Brown is, very well established as the sad sack, go-to loser, but he still like tries to stand up for himself and argue for things. And just the
with his
frustration,
dog.
just resorting to you dumb dog. Like I guess I have felt that sometimes. You're like, I don't understand something. Why do you do this? No, but why? What's wrong with you? What is happening? Like, I just when I was flipping through to pick for this, I just started giggling so much at it. I don't know. It's just funny. I don't have an artful reason beyond that. It really just makes me laugh.
Well, it's a great strip. Michael's a big fan of the Snoopy imitations. Where does the alligator rate for you, Michael?
Oh, top 5.
Top 5?
Vulture, of course, is number 1.
Yes, everyone loves the vulture.
I wanted a strip that just represented Peanuts making me laugh because, again, part of my history with it is Kevin demanding that I appreciate it. And it would be a strip like this. They'd be like, God, that is funny. You know, it's very easy to zero in on the philosophical or the deeper aspects of Peanuts, which I also love, but none of that would matter if it wasn't funny. And it was funny so often. And this is one that just cracks me up.
I also think like when we were reading these strips, like in the late 80s or whatever, you almost took for granted how weird Snoopy was, that he would pretend to be all these things. And every now and then when you step away from it and come back, that you would have a dog that thinks it's an alligator, pretends to be an alligator, is so weird and strange and so funny. And a lot of the strips I almost picked were like just Snoopy doing things and Charlie Brown being like, why is my dog like this? They're very funny. One I almost picked was just like Charlie Brown had been told to draw his dog for a homework assignment and Snoopy starts posing. Charlie Brown it's basically like, I'm going to tell my teacher I don't know any real dogs. And it's just I was like, wow, what a weird world that we almost take for granted that Snoopy became.
At the second to last panel, this be happy with the things you have, be happy with what you are. Like, why is he angrily yelling that at somebody? Oh gosh, I love it.
Absolutely brilliant strip. Well, here's a question and something we talk about all the time. You guys perform on stage and make people laugh in real time. And this is something that he writes. He's on his own. He's sitting in his studio. 6 weeks later, it goes out to faceless people and maybe they laugh, maybe they don't. I mean, do you have any insight in what would make someone choose one over the other than just maybe fear of crowds or whatever? But it seems like the impulse to entertain has such a variety of ways to take it. Why did you guys ever consider doing something like this as opposed to performing?
I can't draw. Kevin draws a little. I don't think I have the confidence either. I need the live audience to tell me if I'm on the right track. Like, I don't know if I would feel secure about something.
And are you able to? Oh, obviously you are. You just adjust if it's not. You're able to in the moment switch to something.
Yeah.
I think that's impressive.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Incredible.
Like we learned just from being on stage. Like you had to learn how to do that because the audience was like, I mean, that's why you're doing it, to make them laugh. And if they're not laughing, you've got to try other things. Yeah, it seems terrifying to do these things in isolation and then wait and like whatever, he would do them and then they would probably be printed a month later. And it's not like even then he was getting letters on specific strips all the time. So he would never know probably if certain strips worked.
Well, if you guys are acting and you're in front of cameras where people can't laugh, I mean, what do you pull from? Are you just pulling from kind of a sense memory of what people have laughed about before? Does it feel awkward, or if it's just kind of like that's just the way it is?
I mean, my experience, I've only had a relatively small amount of experience in front of cameras compared to on stage, but I'm pulling from stage memory. Like, what would an audience think of this?
Yeah.
I'm guessing. But also, if you're doing film stuff, there's a director and a screenwriter, and you kind of don't, if you're the actor, you don't get to pick. Like my small parts on television, I'll get like 5 lines. There'll probably be 4 takes of it. So I'll have the way I want to do it. I'll do that first. The director will ask for sometimes something else, sometimes something pretty different. I'll do that. Maybe there was a mistake or they want me to refine it. I'll do it a 3rd time and then one more for safety and it's out. And so I'll give him a range. And then when it comes out, I look at the one he picked and it might not be the one that I picked. And frequently I want to do a very deadpan small one. And the director's like, way too small. And it's like, okay. But I'll sometimes still think, I still think that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
But if I'm the, appearing only in one episode character who's got 4 lines, I've got no clout to make that argument.
It must be weird because then you have to build a reel of the things you've done, and then that's defining how someone who's going to pick you for the next job at seeing you, and you're kind of building to something.
It's given me more sympathy for like when people assume the actors have so much agency in films, and they have like none.
Yeah.
Like the editor and the writer and the director have so much more power over how you look.
I never understood when someone would say, why could the actor have ever decided to be in this film, as if they'd already seen it before they were in it?
Yeah, you have no idea.
Right.
I did a brief appearance in the sitcom Brooklyn Nine-Nine, right? And they did some improv on that show. If Andy Samberg, the star and executive producer, was in the scene, he would sometimes say, let's try this line, let's try this line. And because he was the star and the executive producer, people would be like, all right, let's do it. So I was in a scene where I had no lines, and they did a take where they improvised, and he basically was like, you say something this time. And so I said a couple of things, and then he was like, all right, keep that. We're going to do it again. Keep it. And he goes, but put nothing on it. Like, just leave nothing on it. It was the only time that anybody's told me this. And to me, it was like, Rocky being told, go hard. Like, I was like, oh, you want nothing? You've never seen nothing like I can do. Get ready for nothing. But I was so excited, and I did it. And you know what? I think it's one of the funniest clips I have, that's not saying too much, but I was like, yeah, Sandberg's a comedian. Like he knows that you go small sometimes.
Weren't you also once in an audition asked to go small, and you warned them? You're like, oh, I never get asked to do that. And then you did it, and they're like, okay, way, way, way bigger.
No, I have two times of this. One time I was in the waiting room, and the casting director comes out. This happens a lot for commercials, where to speed things up, they'll tell you in advance what they're looking for. So they came out, they're like, all right, because commercial actors are often quite hammy and sweaty and desperate. So the casting director's like, look, guys, the director wants this not just small, but small and sad. And I turned to the guy next to me, and I was like, I'm getting this. And I did. I booked it.
Nicely done.
And then another time, Kevin, is we were in the room, and they're like, it was 5 of us. And they're like, all right, everybody, as small as you can. And we did a take. And it was like, and one by one, he was like, you smaller, you pointed at me, but you a lot bigger. I was like, all right, you asked for it. Yeah. So smallness, I don't know, it's often the way to go for comedy, but people don't have the confidence that if there's not an audience there to prove that it's working, people are like, no, bigger, louder, faster.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes that works, right? Like Jim Carrey can go so big and it's the funniest thing ever. There's certainly tons. The funniest moments are probably the big moments. They stand out. But for every one of those, there's most comedians. I'm thinking of Peter Sellers, Kristen Wiig, Will Ferrell. Mm-hmm. Most of the moments are small. They save the big moment for but I don't know. If you're doing it by committee, and the most powerful person is the most scared person, which is almost always the case, then you're going to be screaming your lines, and you have no clout to do anything about that.
Yeah, doing comic strips, as I grew up with Schulz. Schulz is just in my rhythms of the 4-panel joke, and when I'm doing my own comic strip, I'm constantly fighting to tone it down, because you're spending how many hours on something someone's going to read in 10 seconds. And so you just keep putting in instead of taking out to the point where maybe there's something there it's not screaming at somebody. They actually will maybe lean into it more rather than kind of go, whoa.
I mean, Kevin said the 80s was like a golden era of comic strips. It definitely was one of them. There's been several. But like with Far Side, Calvin and Hobbes, Peanuts, Bloom County, tons of examples of less is more. Not always. There's also tons of examples of things going big, but be pretty frequent to have Calvin, sitting still for 3 panels, and in the 4th one being like, why can't I eat my boogers or whatever?
Right.
Or snowmen placidly sitting there, garishly ripped in half. And you can see that in Peanuts too.
You see Hobbs' little feet going backward. The 4th one.
Yeah.
Well, and Watterson fought for extra space on the Sundays, and sometimes he would use it as just white space, and that was the right call because it was all about the mood and it drew you in, and it's beautiful.
Yet I picked a loud one, so I went against my nature here. You dumb dog made me laugh. It's the biggest take, and I love it.
January 27th, 1964. Lucy is setting up what looks like a slide projector for Charlie Brown. She says, okay, turn off the lights. We get a black panel indicating the lights have gone out. And then in panel 3, Lucy begins her slide presentation. Now, this afternoon, Charlie Brown, we're going to be looking at slides which deal with your many personality faults. Some of them are quite shocking. Take this one, for instance. Charlie Brown sees this and yells, "Og!" Easy, easy, says Lucy. This is only the beginning.
This is my pick. This was when you guys contacted us and you're like, pick your favorite one. This is the one I thought of. I was like, well, I'm doing the slideshow one.
But yeah.
I don't know how. It's got to be one of the all-time strangest and funniest sequences that Lucy, the child psychiatrist, like literally a child who is a psychiatrist, is showing a visual representation just of faults. Like, what could be on this screen? What could she have captured? And why is he just looking? And then what scares him? Like everything, and that you don't see what it is. It's off screen. It's such a weird concept. His scream of reaction. It's like Clockwork Orange, but peanut style. Like, sit in the chair. We're going to strap your eyelids open and make you look at the worst aspects of yourself. This whole sequence, I remember being a kid, like being 9 years old, flipping through the little Fawcett paperback and reading it and just like thinking it was so strange and funny. And then walking around in my life being like, what would my slideshow of faults be? Like, what would be on the screen? Everything about it makes me laugh. I think it's so special. I feel like this would be a frequent pick because it's kind of heightened and so bizarre, but I love it.
Will, what's your take on Lucy? We've been having this ongoing conversation with people. I think William Pepper, who does another great Peanuts podcast, he first brought up this idea that Lucy, at the end of the day, she's trying to help. That, you know, she has good intentions for a lot of what she does. What's your take on Lucy when she's doing stuff like this?
Yeah, she thinks she's helping, but she's one of those people where she's just so self-confident and brash that she's a bully. My take on her is that she's real, like that she's something you run into in real life all the time. Mm-hmm. I definitely have friends that are like, oh, well, Will, you know, you'd never do something like this. And I feel like saying, are you listening to yourself? Like, why are you just punching me in the face? Like, why don't you notice that you're doing that? So I guess that she just rings true. Kevin, what's your take?
I mean, I think she's both. And in this moment, is she trying to hurt Charlie or help Charlie Brown? I think she thinks she's trying to help him, but I think sometimes there's strips where she is trying to hurt him. So I think she kind of does both. I think Lucy, there's a good argument that she is the best character to come out of Peanuts.
Oh, yes. She's been my pick for most valuable Peanut on a couple of years because she really does make things go. And I don't know that there was a kind of a character like her before her.
You pick Lucy above Snoopy? You're insane.
No, not overall. Just we go year by year.
I think there's an argument for it. I think
I am insane. Yeah.
I think Snoopy, there is an argument that Snoopy, as you know, he's obviously huge and the most popular comic strip character of all time. So taking that into account, but
sure.
There is something that like he fits a type of comic strip character that there are lots of. And Lucy is so much more unique and so much more special. I don't know if I would pick Lucy as the best ever, but I'm like, there's a good argument that she is the most important character. I also am drawn to villains in ensembles, sort of like the villain who's part of the ensemble that you can't get rid of. That like Phil Hartman was on News Radio, where he's like, this guy's the jerk, but he's part of the staff and you don't get rid of him. Or I guess like Shelley Long was kind of that on Cheers. Like when a show is all buddies and friends, it's nice, but there's also something nice about like this one character that's like, oh man, everyone hates this character and that gives them such freedom to do so many things that no one else on the show can do or the strip can do.
Maybe Barney on How I Met Your Mother, like
he's a little bit of a
oblivious one.
Yeah, like the characters who have that freedom to go. I mean, Kramer sort of fills that in Seinfeld, though he's not really a villain, but like
he's oblivious.
But like you have characters sometimes that are like bad guys, like, and Lucy sort of is like, she's so mean to Linus and so mean to Charlie Brown and sort of a pest to Schroeder, but also like if you lost her, you'd lose so much. Right? I think if you lost Snoopy, you'd lose so much too. It's crazy for me to say, but like maybe something else could fill that role. But like Lucy, you would just needed to have Lucy come back to fill it.
You're kind of right. Like Snoopy is sort of like there's Bugs Bunny, like the sort of like, I mean, they're quite different, but like in terms of the roles they fill, you know, the confident, swaggering, physically funny creature who kind of wins all the time. Yeah, there are other instances of that. And Lucy's a bit more, wow, you don't see a lot of strips who need Lucy. Although you can say that about a lot of Peanuts. Like how many have a Linus either? Like
nobody, yeah.
Well, that's the big four. I mean, most other strips have maybe one or two memorable characters. He's got these four, which is it's the big leagues. They're in every strip. So it's just like different combinations of them set up different kinds of jokes.
I think like if you look at like Bloom County when he came back and did Outland, like Steve Dallas was one of the characters that came back, and that's a weird choice from Bloom County. But I think it's because Steve Dallas was a jerk, and everybody else serves a purpose. Wasn't. And like you didn't need Milo and Binkley as much as you needed Steve Dallas. You need Opus, of course, but you need Steve Dallas for some of these jokes that are in his mind. He's like, well, I need Steve Dallas to do those. And so it's interesting that character sort of survived where lots of the other Bloom County characters did not survive. And Lucy is that to the umpteenth degree.
The other thing, we've been talking about things like Bloom County and Calvin and Hobbes, and those strips lasted a decade.
Yeah.
Snoopy hadn't even gotten on top of his doghouse until 1959. It's crazy to think of the slow burn Peanuts was and Schulz was, developing this thing.
It's crazy that he was willing to do it and able, that the demand was such that he could do it. Like, it's just such a crazy freak thing that had happened.
I mean, how many years until Lucy became this Lucy? Like, that wasn't quick either.
No, she was like a wide-eyed toddler at the beginning. Yeah. Asking her dad to go get her glasses of milk and stuff like that. And then we just covered fairly recently, the psychiatry booth started in 1959, and then he did one strip, and then he didn't use it for a year and a half. So he obviously didn't think when he first did it that it was much of anything. So that might be an instance where he did get, reader feedback after maybe the books came out or whatever and started putting it in more.
That's crazy that he could remember to do it again after that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It must have been people responding and going, hey, we liked that. I'm thinking maybe when the book came out, because it's so long after. It's like it is almost a year and a half, I think, before he brings it up a second time. Except one time he put it on a cover. So
someone put it on a cover.
Someone did. That's true. Well, he had to draw it. April 2nd, 1966. Charlie Brown is on the mound. He fires one in. A little dribbling ground ball goes towards shortstop, and Charlie Brown thinks, he hit it right to my shortstop. This will be an easy out. In panel 3, we see the shortstop, who is Snoopy, who is sitting on top of second base, pretending he is the World War I flying ace. He thinks to himself, here's the World War I flying ace zooming through the air in his Sopwith Camel. In the last panel, Charlie Brown just looks out at the readers and says, sigh.
This is another one of mine. Yeah, I don't know, man. This strip tickles me. For one, like, when Snoopy does the World War I flying ace, he's usually like in costume and sort of alone often. Like, that he would be doing it in the middle of a baseball game is like next level. There's so many things I like about the strip. That Charlie Brown is confident. Charlie Brown didn't get a line drive that knocked him over. It's a slow dribbler. He's confident his team will get it, and his team is filled with people like Snoopy. It's also funny to me. Like, this kid doesn't have a chance to win the game. Like, he sort of takes the blame. Like, whenever he sits out, they win. It doesn't make sense that they would ever win, even without him pitching.
Right.
Because his team has got like Lucy dropping fly balls, Snoopy Snoopy falling asleep as shortstop.
Right.
Sally's in the outfield a lot.
Yeah, it's just this team doesn't make any sense. It's very funny to imagine this ball just rolling by Snoopy, who doesn't notice it because he's in his own world pretending he's flying an airplane. It's hilarious. And I don't know. It is just
the kid we played Little League with, and we called him Jukebox because he would stand out in the outfield and just put on full shows. He would just sing and dance in right field, and that was it. That was what he did.
Now imagine if he was a dog. Yeah, I don't know. It's just the absurdity of it, the silliness of it, and just watching that ball sort of dribble by for 2 panels is also very funny.
And the physical comedy is so good always. Just the timing of it's crazy.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And that like this World War and Flying Ace had become like a trope already that you could just insert it there and be like, yeah, that's something Snoopy would do. It's a reaction of readers.
What a strange trip. World War I Flying Ace, not even like a World War II fantasy. Like what an old man taste these kids have.
And this is, that's true. This is April of 1966. So it's less than a year after the first appearance of the World War I Flying Ace. So yeah, he is just confident that at this point, less than a year later, everyone knows this.
I mean, do people know what a Sopwith camel is? I definitely only know that from Peanut Strip. Like, was that a common reference in the 60s where you would know the model of a plane?
Yeah, the other genius he has is these words. You know, he talks about how his favorite composer is actually Brahms, but Beethoven is funnier. You know, he just has the sense that he knows it's not just a biplane, it's a Sopwith camel. Even if you don't know what it is. Well, actually, in that one, you'd really be thrown off. But yeah, he knows those words that are just going to be funny.
Yeah, it's a well-composed strip. It just, and I don't know, it doesn't feel like this one would necessarily be like anyone's top 10, but when I was flipping, man, this strip floored me. I was like, well, I picked one. This is just so funny. I was surprised. Like, I'm reading it, and I was surprised by how Snoopy missed the ball.
And I like that it somehow ties back to Snoopy's lack of respect for Charlie Brown, too. Like, he's not even going to be bothered to try to play shortstop for him. He's doing his own thing.
Yeah, he's facing the opposite way.
Right.
Sitting on the base also. Come on.
Right. This is all kinds
It's
of
also
bad.
funny when Snoopy's the best player on the team. Like, the guy with no thumbs is the best fielder.
He has a thumb when he needs it.
Yeah.
I'm so excited about this because this is part of one of my favorite long Peanut stories. This is January 28th, 1975. Snoopy and Peppermint Patty are bouncing around uncontrollably on a waterbed. Marcy comes in and says, "Sir, I think some burglars have stolen all your furniture." Peppermint Patty, who is completely out of control bouncing on the waterbed, says, "I know they have, Marcy. Help me get off this waterbed." Now Marcy jumps on, and all three of them are bouncing completely out of control. Marcy yelling, "Stop bouncing, sir! I can't help you!" In the last panel, Snoopy finally gets to the foot of the bed saying, "Ah, land at last." Peppermint Patty, in midair, yells out to Marcy, "Stop calling me sir!"
This is one of mine. I'm realizing now I picked a lot of loud, slapsticky ones, but gosh, it just makes me laugh. I wanted one with Marcy in it. Marcy's kind of one of my favorite characters. So I just was trying to find a Marcy one. But then when I stumbled on this, just the physicality of them being thrown about by a waterbed is just such a silly visual idea. The air they're getting, they're bouncing off the waterbed, their full height over the mattress. Is quite funny. The Peppermint Patty's helpless face in the first panel. Snoopy being fully upside down with his ears extended in the third panel makes me laugh. Just every drawing is funny to me, in addition to just the concept. And and they get the game of the Sir game is in here, where Marcy calls Peppermint Patty Sir, which is such an absurd little dynamic that I love.
Love it.
Yeah. So that's my pick because it just encompasses a lot of things that I just love about Peanuts.
Just good, funny drawing. I've always loved this sequence, and it runs for quite a while. Where Snoopy is, or Peppermint Patty's dad is out of town on business or something like that. So Snoopy comes over to be her guard dog. There's also a really sad strip in this sequence where Marcy says, "We can't stay alone, sir. What about your mom?" And she said, Peppermint Patty just says, "I don't have a mom, Marcy." It's like, I cannot think of many, 4-panel joke a day strips that would do that.
Really not at that time.
No. Really, really great.
Peppermint Patty is just such an amazing character. Like, no mom, the tomboy jock girl raised by her dad. You see moments of super competence from her, where she's like a really superior athlete and she's self-possessed and brash. Then she usually gets defeated, right? Like she loses a lot. Mm-hmm. But my heart goes out to her. Like Peppermint Patty breaks my heart, maybe more than Charlie Brown in a way. And I guess I always kind of thought that she would be a placeholder just for queer characters a little bit. Like, I don't even know, if Schulz had that in mind, but at least somebody who was confident in some areas and not confident in romance and sex in the way society wanted her to be. And she and Marcy just were always kind of the queer girls without being called that, in a way that whether Schulz meant it or not, I think he instinctually was like progressive and full of different types that you didn't see. And I love Peppermint Patty and Marcy. Like, I want to like hug them and take care of them. And I want to thank Patty's dad for doing his best.
Yeah.
It's just lovely and hilarious. Like, they're so funny. I almost picked the one where Peppermint Patty gets a haircut and the barber thinks she's a boy and gives her a boy haircut and she's humiliated. Because there is something so deeply traumatizing about a bad haircut when you're a kid. I think especially if you're a girl, though I didn't love getting them when I was a kid either. But I almost went that way. But then the stupid physicality of the waterbed got me good, and I had to pick it.
It's so funny, so funny.
Yeah.
I just love every one of those drawings. Is perfect. Just in it couldn't be more delightful. Just all these iconic like that second panel, which is just abstract art, except that it's Peppermint Patty just flying over the waterbed. Really great.
Yeah, just blow that frame up and put it on your wall.
April 26, 1962. Lucy joins Charlie Brown up on the pitcher's mound and says, "No wonder you want to be the pitcher, Charlie Brown. It's cool up here on the pitcher's mound." She continues, "You should feel how hot it is out there in center field. We don't get any breeze at all." And she calls out to the outfield, "Hey, girls, come up here. Feel the cool breeze." Patty, Violet, and Frida all join Lucy with Charlie Brown on the mound, and they just enjoy the cool breeze.
Yeah, this is my last one. I love this one too. I picked it. The baseball ones are also great. Yeah, I don't know. I love Lucy. As I said, there's something very fun about her, that she has such wide range of things that she can get away with. Like, this is not being mean or a bully, which is her sort of standard MO. This is just her, I don't know, just like, this does not feel, there's no motive here. There's nothing happening here other than she genuinely enjoys the breeze. Everyone comes up and they do enjoy the breeze. And Charlie Brown is just standing in the middle of this, has no control of his team. It's very funny to me. I also, it's unrelated to the strip, I love Frida. Frida makes me laugh a lot. I think she's a underrated Peanuts character.
The naturally curly hair Frida.
Yeah, that she brings that up a lot. That she sort of kind of is an upbeat energy, even though she kind of is mean to Snoopy a lot. I don't know. Something about Frida I really like. That's irrelevant to the strip. The strip is just Charlie Brown surrounded by his 4 female players just enjoying the breeze on his pitcher's mound. That can't be that nice also, but it's very funny.
It's interesting, you were mentioning Peppermint Patty and her competence in one thing and then struggling in other areas. Frida just exudes confidence. I kept trying to think of a time when she's really doesn't have it all together in her own mind. She's always sending Snoopy out to chase bunnies, and she knows what she thinks is right, and she tries to put that out into the world, and that is so different. I mean, the female characters in this strip, like you're saying, are very rich, and they're all distinct, right? When we were talking about Violet and Patty and how they in time kind of go into the background as these other stronger characters take over, but Frida we were saying that Frida in a way was like a one joke character. Like, sometimes that's how Schulz will introduce a character like Pigpen, and he stays Pigpen.
Yeah.
And Frida, she had some things up her sleeve that she stayed around for a longer time. But yeah, what do you think it is about Schulz and these female characters in this strip that really make it stand out?
It's interesting that Lucy's like, "Hey, girls, come up here." She doesn't call the whole team. It's just the girls to enjoy the breeze. And so you see Violet and Patty and Frida and Lucy. I guess Sally's not playing today. And
might still be a baby at this point.
Yeah, maybe she's still a baby. Not like these mature 5-year-olds. And I don't know. As a dude, I don't know if I could speak to it, but I'll just say that so many characters in Peanuts contained multitudes somehow. Like over time, you know them. Probably any group of friends, if the group of friends reads Peanuts, they all say, "Oh, I'm this person." Yeah. Like they know who they identify with or whatever. I think that's kind of interesting. Frida's a little Sally redundant. Most Frida jokes, except for the curly hair stuff, I could see Sally doing, like sort of insistent and you got to do this and what, like a.
Sally is brasher and meaner than Frida. I know that maybe is such a silly nuance.
So Sally's like Frida and Lucy combined, kind of.
Yeah.
Maybe.
When I think of Sally, I think of self-preservation. She's got a really strong sense of self-preservation.
Well, although as that the musical Your Good Man, Charlie Brown, as they evolve it and change it over decades, they did eventually drop the Frida character and gave her parts to Sally. So,
I mean, it makes sense. I don't remember seeing Frida a ton in the later ones, but when I was kind of going through picking, I kind of read through the stretch where she was first introduced, and I was like, oh man, these are really great, delightful strips of this character's new to a school, becomes friends with Linus, and sort of immediately finds a niche in this group. Anyway,
yeah, so good.
In a way that Sally doesn't. Sally is like an angrier, more scared character. Sally does a lot of stuff out of fear. Like when I think of Sally, I think of her in school.
Yeah.
Like,
why do I
terrified
have to
at
do this?
Failing or desperate to get Linus to like her.
Yeah.
Which I think is also Sally's also very funny.
And her presence changes Charlie Brown because he becomes a big brother, and that makes a little bit of a difference too.
And her disrespect for Charlie Brown almost hurts more than the dog. I don't know.
Even the fact that she calls him Charlie Brown. They're in the same family. That's so weird. All right, and that brings us to June 30th, 1975. Charlie Brown is at a bus station, and he's talking up into the bus. Somebody is obviously in there that he wants to talk to. And he says, Joe? Second panel, we see him talking up to the bus. I'm one of your fans, Joe. I'm sorry you lost your job. Are you leaving town? Then the next panel, he says, before the bus leaves, would you autograph my baseball? You'll always be my hero. Then in the last panel, Charlie Brown looks up and says, try not to cry on the ball, Joe. It makes the ink run.
Oh,
Joe Shlabotnik.
Yeah, I love it. Has this one been picked by people? I feel like I don't know. It's maybe everybody feels this way, but some of the Peanut strips, I can't believe that everybody doesn't think of them a lot. But I think of this one kind of frequently. Charlie Brown's favorite. You can't just say Charlie. Charlie Brown's favorite character is this loser baseball player who's always being sent down to, maybe not always, I don't know how many times Joe's in it, but like who's getting fired or sent down a league or is not good, and Charlie Brown still loves him. I don't know. That's something so sweet and endearing. And honestly, I relate to Joe. Like I've done stuff on stage, but Kevin has too. But like we did it at this, at a theater for relatively small audiences. But now and then someone would come be like, "You're so funny," and it would be like, and I would think like, "I am Joe Shlabotnik." This. I've had people ask for my autograph, and I'm just sort of like, "All right," but then I got to get back to waiting on this table or whatever.
You learned to bring the waterproof Sharpie.
Yeah. There's something just so sweet about it. It's just memorable. Try not to cry in the ball, Joe. It makes the ink run. What just a heartbreaking thing to say to a grown man. I love it.
Is he crying because he lost his job? Is he crying because he's so moved that Charlie Brown wants his autograph?
I'm picturing that he's moved. There's no way to know, but like, you'll always be my hero. And then he's crying. Yeah. I feel like that's it. Grown men crying makes me laugh. Like at the end of Rushmore, when Bill Murray is crying at Max Fisher's Vietnam play. It's just one of the funniest things I've seen. Like unexpected tears gets me good.
Well, I love that Charles Schulz decides 25 years into the strip to just bring it in panel one and go, yeah, I'm going to draw a bus in perspective, the lighting of the parking garage, a full-on brick wall with some bus. Like he has gone so minimal for so long now, but for whatever reason, he's like, I'm going to go the extra mile here.
Do you think he's doing that to really bring you into the space and make that last panel hit home?
I think he must decide he needs it. I would imagine that Schulz he's still doing the minimum. Just to him, it's like, I can't do less than this. It won't work if I don't do this.
Yeah. I think that's what it is. Like he he does as little as you need for the strip to get the idea across, and this is just a bigger idea. Like his idea just had too many pieces. There was maybe when he thought of it, he was like, is there a way to do this without the bus? Oh, it doesn't work.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, and it does take it completely outside the usual Peanuts realm of the neighborhood and all the friends and stuff like that. So yeah, probably was a thing where he was maybe a little outside his comfort zone and had to bring a little extra to it just to sell it.
I mean, the dialogue stays minimal because of the drawing. It's just Charlie Brown going Joe, and it looks like a Hopper painting. I mean, it looks like just that first panel. I can hang it up and it'd be like, why is this sad painting on your wall?
Yes, very much like a Hopper painting. Also has the feel of the animated specials in a weird way, you know?
Yeah, that's true. Because they would have to have those establishing shots in the locations.
Well, it's interesting looking at the 8 strips that you guys have shared with us today. There's one thing I'm noticing that is not in any of these 8. Would you guess what I'm thinking?
Linus.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, we hate smart people. We resent the intellectuals.
Harold and I are big Linus fans. We always pick him as Peanut of the Year.
That's why I have to pick Lucy and other characters now and again, because it's just they're so biased.
there's a Linus lobby.
Yes.
Right. Yeah,
I'm honestly surprised because we do love Linus, I can think of lots of Linus strips that I like, but so I don't know why.
I picked like 10 strips and then I whittled it down to 4. Luckily, Will did 4 before me, so I knew I didn't have to go all the way to 3. And the only one that with Linus I think that almost made the cut for me was when Lucy buries his blanket. I had a strip from there where he's digging up all around Charlie Brown. I just have a distinct memory of reading that in those paperbacks. I like Linus a lot, but he is the 4th of the big 4 that I think of when I think of what makes me laugh the most.
All right, well, so if you guys were going to give your most valuable Peanut all time, which one would you pick?
I mean, it's too obvious to say Charlie Brown, but it's got to be Charlie Brown.
Mm-hmm.
Got to be Charlie Brown. I mean, the right answer is the boring answer. It's Charlie Brown and then Snoopy and then Lucy and then Linus. Yeah, but it's like I'm picking the Beatles. If I take any of them out, it doesn't work. So it doesn't matter.
If Lucy doesn't, I mean, as much as I was just raving about how great Lucy was, she doesn't work without Charlie Brown to bounce off of. Like she works pretty well against Linus, but she works better against Charlie Brown. And Snoopy does a lot of solo stuff, but some of his best stuff is off of Charlie Brown.
Mm-hmm.
And it's perfect that that's his dog, of course. He's got a loser kid who's got the most interesting dog in the world. Being shown up by your dog by such a degree is insane.
If answering that question that way, we're picking what's the most valuable for the strip to function. But if I'm just picking the most valuable just for my own personal reading experience, which is not necessarily what makes the strip work, I really might pick the dyad of Patty and Marcy. Like they elevate the strip to me to where it's more than just slapstick or gags. Like they make it, I can picture families and parents and growing up and school way more. Like Charlie Brown and Linus, it can exist just in like a void of a philosophical discussion. But Patty and Marcy are in the real world. They don't exist without like the world around them, I think. So I would never pick Patty and Marcy to be the most valuable for the functioning of the strip. But for me, like when I was flipping through these, at first I was picking the ones I remembered about Charlie Brown and Snoopy, blah, 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 slideshow faults. Then when I saw the Patty and Marcy, I'm like, oh, right. This whole wing of the emotional landscape that they create. I don't know. It's the addition of those two characters makes it like 10 times as rich, I think. So in terms of value added, they might have the biggest impact.
It's interesting that you say that they're kind of more rooted in reality. You know, when you think of the other characters, they do have these ties, stronger ties to the surrealism of Snoopy or the abstraction or kind of the craziness of the Great Pumpkin or this or that. But yeah, that's a really interesting point that these two characters generally stay close to what I guess you might call normality. Versus the other characters.
Patty's playing baseball in a normal way. She's got a dad. She doesn't have a mom. They do homework and they have trouble. She sometimes gets a crush on Charlie Brown and doesn't know what to do about it. Or she gets flattered. Yeah, but you don't really ever see Peppermint Patty just like pretending to be a vulture or waxing philosophic about a thing. Like she's worried about things that kids do worry about, right? She's not like, what would God say here? She's kind of like, I got to get my homework done.
Right.
Yeah. And she really grounds Charlie Brown. I think about, some of those they kind of have their conversations sitting on either side of the tree and that sort of thing. But yeah, there's this really grounding feeling to that. And I can't help but connect Peppermint Patty to Jeannie Schulz, his second wife. I kind of get that vibe that there's just something different in his life at this time. And it's hard to obviously make conjectures about this, but that's kind of the sense I get that Schulz is, there's something he's settling into at this part of his life. This is like halfway through the strip, when she's really becoming the strong character. And it's a part of his life that you think maybe wasn't so much a part of his life before.
That said, she often doesn't realize Snoopy's a dog, so she does have some silly.
Right, funny looking kid with the big nose.
But that might be the most realistic way to interpret Snoopy. If a dog did what Snoopy did, I don't know how else you would accept it as reality. It's like, well, that's clearly not a dog. It,
right.
Like, picked up a baseball. It has clothes. It
Multiple
understands
outfits.
what we're saying. It is friends with birds. Like there's no way that's a dog. Like that's a kid.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys have done this, but if the big four are like the primary colors, right? Charlie Brown, Lucy, Linus, and Snoopy, you could express all the other characters as combos of them, maybe. And Peppermint Patty is like Lucy and Linus combined, maybe. Or maybe Lucy and Schroeder. I'll say Lucy and Schroeder. Like competent, mean, and bossy, but also friends with, like, on Charlie Brown's side most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like when Peppermint Patty yells at Charlie Brown, he's like, come on, stand up for yourself, Chuck. Like
right.
you don't need to deal with this. It's like Lucy in a Schroeder
Touched
way.
my hand, you sly dog.
You sly dog.
You sly dog. It's so funny. You sly dog. I'm going to say that today to somebody.
You're
Well,
holding
she's
my
like,
hand,
I'll have another coffee, you sly dog. Sir, get out of this restaurant. But you sly dog is, I forgot about it, Kevin. What a great phrase. There's so many.
Yeah.
What a genius strip.
Yeah, she calls Snoopy a boy and she calls Charlie Brown a dog.
Well, guys, thank you so much for doing this. It just means the world to me. We love your podcast and can't wait for new seasons and just hope it goes for years and years and years. Is there anything you'd like to plug or a place where people could find you online?
They can find our podcast social media at Screw It Comics at Instagram and Screw It Comics on Twitter. That's the easiest way to find the podcast. I'm Kev Hines, I think, on Twitter.
You are
sure.
Kev Hines. Wait, are you
Great,
Kev Hines
good,
12?
good.
No, you're Kev Hines.
I think I'm Kev Hines. I'm Kev Hines 12 on Instagram.
Okay.
That's less interesting. I don't post it very much personally, but Kev Hines.
If you want to follow the enterprises of Will Hines, Instagram is the best place to follow me. Willie B. Hines. I usually plug stuff there most reliably. But honestly, guys, thanks for having us. And honestly, just knowing who we are and listening to our podcast at all and really watching that Garfooled sketch. Like, you're the first person I know has seen it. So really, I mean, I'm saying it in a flip way, but I mean it sincerely. Thank you for that.
Oh, our pleasure. Glad we found it, and we will definitely share it.
It's nice. Garfoold's views got up over 20 now, 21 views.
Oh, we're going to get it up to 23, 24. Don't you worry.
Oh, man. All right. Now it's trucking.
And if you guys want to follow us, you can check us out on both Twitter and Instagram. We're Unpack Peanuts. You can visit us on our website, unpackingpeanuts.com, where you can vote for your strip of the year, check out some transcripts. And if you really wanted to, you could check out the store and buy some of our work, which would be really great because we're working cartoonists and would love the support. Other than that, just come back next week and we'll be back where we're talking about more great works from Charles M. Schulz and the cast of Peanuts, our favorite comic strip. Until then, for Michael and Harold, this is Jimmy. Be of good cheer.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a good cheer.
Unpacking Peanuts is copyright Jimmy Gownley, Michael Cohen, and Harold Buchholz. Produced and edited by Liz Sumner. Music by Michael Cohen. Additional voiceover by Aziza Shakrala Clark. For more from the show, follow Unpacked Peanuts on Instagram and Twitter. For more about Jimmy, Michael, and Harold, visit unpackingpeanuts.com. Have a wonderful day, and thanks for listening.
Dink.
Please believe it or not. Curtis, Fraz, Cul-de-sac, Kathy, for better or for worse. Luann, Zippy the Pinhead, Tom the Dancing Bug, Tom Tomorrow. Life is Hell, Red Meat, Dykes to Watch Out For, Mackey's, Non Sequitur, Apartment 3G, Brenda Starr, Rex Morgan, MD, Terry and the Pirates, Cappy Dick, Steve Canyon,